The incredible journey of a woman mechanic. They laughed until the engine roared back to life. Claire stared at the assemblage of tools hanging from the wall, each metal gleaming under the flickering fluorescent lights of the garage. The weight of the last few months pressed down on her, a reality painted in grease stains and lingering doubts. The laughter of local men wafted through the open bay door, mocking her resolve as they swapped stories of more qualified mechanics. She gritted her teeth, feeling the heat of their ridicule bloom in her chest like a thick fog. If only they knew how hard she worked, not just to keep her father's shop alive, but to forge a space for herself and for Lily in a world that often refused to acknowledge their existence. Problems compounded daily, with bills stacking high, a persistent reminder of her inability to keep up. Yet despite the heavy air of despair, Claire refused to break. Every engine she started brought a whisper of hope. Every tire she changed was a small victory against a tide of biting cynicism. If only she could turn back time, she thought, recalling the days when her father would walk her through the garage, his hands gentle yet firm, instilling in her a passion she hoped would burn brightly enough to fend off their sneering judgments. Today felt different, though, as Claire threw herself into the work. A glimmer of excitement sparked inside her as she stumbled across boxes of classic car parts buried in the corner, remnants of her father's dream to restore an iconic muscle car. As she unwrapped each piece, her heart raced, feeling the weight of years gone by and the potential each rare item held. It felt like a lifeline, a possibility to transform their dwindling legacy into something extraordinary. She envisioned entering the local car show, the murmurs fading as she showcased not just her skills, but the spirit of her father, forever etched into the fabric of the garage. But just as she began to assemble her plans, doubt crept in her mind, relentless and vile. An influential member of the town, known for his dismissive nature, had already expressed his disdain for women in the auto repair industry. She could hear his voice cutting through the noise, saying she would never have what it takes to compete. Could she really silence those who laughed at her? And what if her wares didn't impress? Claire's hands trembled as she considered the futility of it all. What if all of this effort ended in humiliation? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days blurred together, Claire became consumed, her spirit igniting with every challenge tossed her way. Unfazed by the condescension, she fought to push back against each dismissive gaze that threatened to crush her. With each passing moment, she felt the internal conflict escalate. Her desire to be accepted as a mechanic gripped her at the core, yet her longing for independence and respect steadily overpowered those insecurities. She couldn't let this dream dwindle to mere scraps of auto parts. Today was the day she would unveil her work, but as she prepared backstage, her breathing hitched at the familiar voice from the crowd. "What makes you think you can compete?" The sneer pierced her heart, making it nearly impossible to breathe. The laughter faded, replaced by the palpable tension of anticipation. Claire stood on the precipice of recognition, each second stretching longer than the last. And in that moment, uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. Would she roar back to life? Would the engine of her spirit drown out the laughter? The moment arrived, and with it, all the weight of her dreams hung heavy in the air, waiting to explode or crumble beneath the weight of every judgment cast. Claire inhaled deeply, steadying herself despite the anxiety coiling in her stomach. The dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the garage doors, creating an almost surreal atmosphere that felt both familiar and foreign. Around her, the hum of gossip buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. But today those noises sharpened her focus rather than dulling it. She was determined to silence them, even if just for a moment. She stepped out from behind the curtain, her heart racing in sync with the tattoo of a drum. The vibrant red of the classic muscle car gleamed in anticipation, a stark contrast against the somber backdrop of the garage. It was no longer just an assemblage of scraps. It was a testament to her efforts, her late-night tinkering, and the hours spent alone in the dim light, hammering away at what felt impossible. For the first time, she saw beyond the rust and dented edges. She glimpsed the potential for a new beginning as she approached the vehicle. The laughter and murmurs grew quieter, replaced by an expectant silence. She could feel eyes boring into her, a dozen judgments hanging in the air like a noose. With each click of her heels against the concrete floor, Claire fought to contain the torrent of self-doubt that threatened to surface. What if she stumbled? What if she failed? Each scenario ignited the smoldering anger she had fought against for so long. But Claire was not merely a woman in a man-ass world. She was a mechanic with a purpose. The moment she laid her hands on the tools, they transformed from instruments of labor into symbols of her autonomy. The wrench slipped perfectly into her grip, a feeling of old familiarity wrapping around her like a well-worn glove. She took a step closer to the muscle car's engine, and as her fingers brushed over the polished surface, memories of working alongside her father flooded back. His laughter, warm and encouraging, filled her thoughts, chasing away the cold shadows of doubt. "Let us show them what real work looks like," she murmured to herself, her voice barely above a whisper, igniting the fire within. She began her presentation, talking through the restoration process, detailing her meticulous methods. Each explanation was infused with her passion, drawing the crowd in with a growing sense of uncertainty. Perhaps there was more to her than they had anticipated. The influential critic, seated prominently at the front, raised an eyebrow, skepticism painted all over his face. Yet, something in her tone shifted the atmosphere. She described the engine upgrades, the new transmission, how the gears meshed beautifully, a metaphor for what she was striving to accomplish in her life. Each technical term she shared carried the weight of her knowledge and the roots of her father's teachings. This wasn't just about a car. It was a reflection of her spirit, a show of resilience. As she neared the end of her presentation, Claire's confidence mounted. She stood before them not as an underdog, but as an equal, throwing her fears into the wind. The laughter that had once stung her seemed distant now, drowned out by her steadfast determination. The audience began to shift. She noticed nods of acknowledgement and murmurs of intrigue brewing among the men who had once scoffed at her. Then, that dismissive voice broke the moment, interrupting her triumph. "Impressive, but it takes more than a few shiny parts to impress real mechanics," he called out, his tone dripping with disdain. Claire's heart dropped, the fluttering butterflies transforming into jagged edges. Yet where others might have faltered, she felt a surge within her. Just as her pulse quickened and her mouth opened to respond, she realized this was her moment, a turning point not just for the presentation, but for her journey. The words caught in her throat, but she clenched her fists, channeling all her anger and determination into her next statement. The tension hung thick in the air as she prepared to confront her greatest critic directly. She knew this was not merely about proving herself to him. It was about silencing the doubts that echoed within her. The time had come to face the naysayers head-on, and Claire was determined to rise above the noise. As she locked eyes with him, a newfound clarity surged through her veins. Would she boldly declare her worth, or would she retreat, letting the laughter ring in her ears one more time? The silence felt heavy as Claire's heart thudded loudly in her chest. For an instant, the cacophony of anxieties and judgments faded into an eerie stillness, leaving only the throbbing pulse of her own determination. She inhaled sharply, memories of her father's unwavering faith in her swirling through her mind like a compass guiding her toward resolve. No, it takes passion, skill, and relentless pursuit to breathe life back into something that seemed dead, she said, her voice stronger than she anticipated. The words were crisp and deliberate, slicing through the lingering doubts that threatened to claim her. She saw skepticism flare briefly in the critic's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty she hadn't noticed before. Each heartbeat fueled her courage as she pushed forward. Real mechanics don't just deal with shiny parts. They embody the very essence of what a vehicle represents, a melding of heart and engineering. It's about understanding the soul of the machine. Claire continued, her tone unwavering. She felt the energy of the audience shift. Curiosity seemed to spark in the eyes that were once doubting. When I work on a car, she explained, I don't just want to fix it. I want to understand it, nurture it back to life, just as my father taught me. Her body buzzed with adrenaline as she threw herself into an explanation of her methods, detailing every detail of her process with the precision of a master artist unveiling a masterpiece. The subtle gleam of the engine and the intricate placements of tools became metaphors for her journey, unearthing her identity, self-worth, and the profound inheritance of knowledge passed from her father. She felt sweat trickle down her spine, but with every word that fell from her lips, the weight of others' expectations lifted just a fraction. The simple act of speaking her truth fed her confidence, a sprouting seed breaking through the layers of dirt. It wasn't merely about the restoration of a car anymore. It was a reclamation of her identity. That a stir in the audience caught her attention as she spoke, observing how the dismissive critic's posture shifted slightly. Perhaps the seeds of doubt she had sown in her presentation were beginning to germinate, growing within others just as they blossomed within her. Yet after what felt like an eternity of warmth, a shadow danced at the edge of her thoughts. The critic's gaze hardened again, and an unsettling smirk returned to his lips. That's all well and good, but can you really compete with the industry veterans? Talk is easy. Action speaks volumes, he taunted, thinly veiling his contempt. The air crackled with tension once more. Claire's fists clenched instinctively, but instead of retreating, she stepped forward, closer to the critic. Each step anchored her in this moment, not only confronting him, but embracing the power of her story. I don't need to compete with anyone. I'm carving my own path, using the lessons my father imparted and the labor I have committed to this craft. This car is not just a project. It is my journey, and I will share it with the world. A murmur of approval rippled through the audience, feeding her courage as she suddenly realized that she was no longer merely defending herself. She was advocating for every dreamer who had ever been silenced. She had begun to dismantle the walls built by doubt, brick by brick. Yet, as she finished speaking, Claire's heart raced. Would this newfound confidence be enough to sway the audience? Could she expect acceptance from those who struggled to see beyond their biases? The critic's expression remained inscrutable, revealing nothing, but Claire felt a shift in the room. The world she navigated was still fraught with challenges, yet she now understood that her professional identity was forged not just through acceptance, but through adversity. The battle with herself was far from over, but today marked a significant evolution in her journey. In the charged atmosphere, Claire felt the ambivalence of her emotions. The need for validation clashed with the conviction that she was enough, just as she was. Pushing past her doubts, she prepared for what came next, knowing the confrontation was only beginning. And it was in that moment of silent resolve that she caught herself again in a lingering glance with the critic. This encounter was merely a prelude. Claire understood that the true test of her resilience awaited beyond this presentation. The stakes were rising, and with them, her determination to prove not just to him, but to herself that she could shape her future one wrench at a time. What awaited her beyond this confrontation loomed like a horizon stained in thick uncertainty. Would the world rally around her change, or would she stand alone in her fight? In that whirlwind of questions, one thing became clear: her journey was only just beginning. Claire stood at the front, her voice still echoing in her ears. The applause had faded, but the energy in the room clung to her like an old sweater, familiar, yet heavy. She remained in place, processing the rush of emotions that surged through her. The audience had responded, albeit cautiously, and for the first time, she felt the tide might be shifting in her favor. Still, the unsettling presence of the critic loomed large, a specter that mocked her newfound confidence. Talk is easy. Action speaks volumes. His words haunted her, a persistent echo that felt like a challenge. What did action look like? It was time to show the world her world, that she was capable of more than just words. She turned away from the stage, heart racing, determination coiling within her like a spring waiting to be released. The workshop awaited her, each tool beckoning her, yearning for the touch of someone who understood what it meant to breathe life into a worn-out machine. Claire marched towards a garage, the scent of oil and metal greeting her like an old friend. Inspiration surged through her veins, inner mind. Claire mapped out the steps she would take. There was a car in the back corner that had been abandoned for too long. A 1965 Mustang, old but not beyond saving. With each rusting bolt she envisioned loosening, she mentally constructed a plan. This was not just about restoring a vehicle. It was about reclaiming her place in the industry. With a newfound sense of purpose, she began to gather her tools. The act of preparing felt almost ritualistic, washing away the remnants of uncertainty that haunted her. She visualized the process, breaking down the barriers of the engine, wrestling with its stubborn parts, coaxing the life back into metal and rubber. The Mustang would symbolize her own battle, a testament to perseverance. If she could transform it, surely she could transform her narrative. That a sudden thought struck her. Could she document her progress? Show the world how she understood this art? The mere idea sent a jolt of excitement through her. Claire felt her insecurities begin to shift and morph into motivation. This time, she wouldn't simply labor in silence. She would create and share. Her hands moving with practiced precision, Claire dug into the engine, and as the dirt layered into her nails, she felt a sense of belonging. This was her element, a resonant reminder that the grind of work often yielded its own wisdom. Each stubborn bolt she wrenched free became a metaphor, a parallel to her struggle against societal expectations. Yet in the quiet moments between tightening screws and pouring in oil, doubt nibbled at her resolve. What if she failed? What if the car didn't roar back to life? Would she let herself down? The voice of that critic lurked in her mind, whispering that she could never escape the shadows of doubt cast upon her. Forcing her hands to cease their frantic movement, Claire took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "You're not a failure. You're a work in progress," she murmured to herself, reciting the mantra she cultivated through her journey. She could feel the anxiety begin to dissolve, relinquishing its grip. The Mustang would be her comeback. With determination coursing through her limbs, she dove back into her task. Each moment of struggle carved new growth within her, blossoming into a deeper understanding of both the work and of who she was. Hours turned into days as her connection to the car deepened. She began to post snippets of her work online, sharing her insights and struggles with a burgeoning audience. The interactions, the feedback, it filled her spirit with a flicker of hope. There were people who wanted to believe in her journey, who saw the value in her craft. It was exhilarating. But as praises began to roll in, they were soon accompanied by skepticism from the same critic who had questioned her in public. He had responded to her posts, dissecting her every move, questioning her intentions, and framing them as mere illusions of competence. Claire couldn't let that silence her. The battle she fought was no longer only against machinery, but against the limiting beliefs of others. Every comment that threatened to undermine her resolve became fuel for her fire. The stakes had intensified, making her even more tenacious. Through labyrinthine twists of learning and application, Claire dove deeper into the mechanics of her craft. Each discovery felt like a small victory, fueling her narrative of growth. Yet the confrontation with that critic loomed ahead, an encounter that would inevitably force her to reconsider everything she had built. As night fell in the workshop, the stark glow of her tools illuminated more than just rust. They glimmered with the promise of transformation, embodying the essence of challenge and triumph. But with every victory came a looming question. When she faced him again, would she emerge as the mechanic she was destined to be, Or would the shadows of doubt stifle her progress? With determination and uncertainty entwined, Claire clenched her fists, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The stage was set, and the engine's growl would soon echo, demanding to be heard. Claire approached the Mustang with renewed vigor each day, the rhythmic clank of tools against metal becoming a percussive soundtrack to her unfolding journey. She steadily dismantled the engine, learning its intricacies like a musician memorizing a new melody. Each bolt and wiring harness was a puzzle piece revealing both the vehicle's character and her own evolving identity within the world of mechanics. The montage of progress flowed through her fingertips, intertwining with her thoughts. The Mustang was more than just a car to her. It became a canvas for her rage, her hopes, and her ambitions. Each time she uncovered a layer of rust, she was also peeling back the layers of doubt she had long carried. It was remarkable how tangible the parallels became. The Mustang lived in a world of uncertainty, much like she did. Left to rust in a forgotten corner, it had been abandoned until she found it. Days turned into weeks. Claire documented the restoration journey meticulously. She set up a small camera in the workshop and shared raw footage of her trials and tribulations. The acknowledgement from her online audience fortified her. Threads of support sprang up, and viewers began sending messages, some with words of encouragement, others sharing their own stories of perseverance. A community began to form, unexpectedly anchoring her journey. However, with each triumph came his sharp words, a disruptor lurking amid the applause. The critic continued to dissect her work online. His insistence that she was merely a hobbyist smeared a cloud of doubt over her head. "You're a playing mechanic," he commented on her latest video, sending a shiver down her spine. No amount of applause could drown out his whispers, but she also recognized she wasn't just doing this for validation anymore. That insight ignited a shift within her. She wasn't merely fixing a car. She was defying stereotypes, crossing uncharted territory, proving to herself that she could stand tall among the giants of the mechanic world. She vowed to tackle each reconstruction with precision and intent, cleansing her process of any lingering need for others' approval. This drive to reclaim her narrative was taking root, and she could feel it echoing through every inch of the workshop. In the quiet of the garage, she often closed her eyes and envisioned the finished vehicle, a Mustang that would not only roar back to life, but would embody her spirit, tenacity, and expertise. What an exhilarating revelation it was to know that within each wrench, turn, and oil exchange, she was building something much larger than a car. She was constructing her self-worth. Yet, lurking deep in the recesses of her heart was a fear that began to bubble back up. What if she wasn't enough? The fear of inadequacy threatened to swell as she neared the final stages of the restoration. Would the engine fire up, or would it fizzle, leaving her exposed? That could very well be her demise, and would serve as crystal clear proof that her efforts were in vain. Claire shook off the anxiety, the doubt threatening to undermine her progress. She could almost hear her own mantra echoing in her mind. She was a work in progress. She willed herself to confront the critic, to gather a firm stance against the doubters. Could she take the next step and not just present the Mustang to her audience, but the best version of herself as well? With trembling hands, she prepared for the moment of ignition. The tools surrounded her like soldiers ready for battle. As she took a deep breath and turned the key in the ignition, a growl echoed through the workshop, vibrating through her bones. But just as she began to feel the swell of triumph, an unexpected sound startled her, a hard knock at the garage door. Heart racing, she hesitated, the echo of her past conflicting with the burgeoning moment of her future. She couldn't allow distractions to derail her. But who could be knocking at this hour? The stakes had risen, and potential hurdles loomed ahead. She knew she could not ignore this interruption. The real question lingered. Would this encounter further fortify her resolve, or would it shatter the fragile confidence she had built? With uncertainty clenching in her gut, she inhaled deeply, steeling herself for the next chapter of her journey. The knock reverberated in the stillness of the garage, ricocheting off the metal walls and stirring an unsettling cocktail of curiosity and dread within Claire. She had come so far, and just when she was on the precipice of a breakthrough, this unexpected interruption clawed at her focus. It felt like a test, one she hadn't seen coming, yet couldn't dodge. With her heart drumming in her chest, Claire wiped her hands on a rag, steeling herself against the unease. The Mustang, with its half-finished beauty, awaited her like a whispered promise. She took one last glance at the gleaming engine she had nurtured into existence and headed for the door. As she pulled it open, the last remnants of daylight spilled into the workshop, highlighting the figure standing on her threshold. It was Jake, her former colleague from the garage where she had first submitted to the rhythm of grease-stained realities. He stood there, a mix of surprise and admiration clouding his eyes. "Well, look at you," he said, a hint of incredulity woven into his voice. "You've really been at it, huh?" "Just getting started," Claire replied, tilting her chin defiantly. His presence awakened a flood of memories of jibes and laughter, no less. But now it was as if she were standing in front of her past, rather than merely viewing it through a lens of bitterness. "You sure you want to be doing this alone?" he asked, leaning against the doorway, an air of casual concern mingling with what she perceived as skepticism. Restoring a car like this isn't exactly a one-woman show. A tightness clenched in her chest. How could he still not understand? And why shouldn't I? She shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. "Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't handle it." Jake held up his hands, palms outward, as if to catch her words mid-flight. "Hey, I'm just saying that if you need help, no, I don't," she replied firmly, feeling a surge of vulnerability. Did he think she couldn't manage? Or was it her own insecurities surfacing, flaring up at the mere mention of assistance? "Well, if you change your mind," he said, shrugging, "I'm right down the street. Just thought I'd check in." He took a step back, surveying the Mustang with newfound respect. "Looks fantastic. Honestly, Claire, it really does." His words hung in the air, and a flicker of doubt seeped through the cracks of her confidence. As he departed, she hesitated between bolstering her self-reliance and admitting that maybe she could benefit from some camaraderie. Closing the door felt monumental, a definitive mark of her resolve as she turned back toward the workshop. But the questions, should she have let him in? What if this was an opportunity to learn from each other rather than compete? Began to swarm relentlessly in her mind, dampening the initial excitement from the ignition of her creation. She felt an internal struggle take shape, the churning indecision a direct challenge to her newfound identity. Each facet of her growing confidence was confronted by the old narrative that had been deeply ingrained. Could she truly conquer this path alone, or was she setting herself up for failure? Claire returned to the Mustang, her gaze falling on the engine once more, a symbol of her labor, her grit, and her independence. She picked up a wrench, the familiar weight sturdy and reassuring in her hand. Perhaps there was a delicate balance embracing the journey she directly controlled while also being open to guidance from trusted allies. Yet, doubts still loomed, akin to shadows cast by the fading light outside. As she resumed her work, each metallic sound danced like a symphony of ambition woven with uncertainty. The question now was strikingly clear. Would she remain steadfast in isolation, or was it time to merge her autonomy with collaboration? The engine stood before her as a testament to her toil, but the real challenge lay in igniting not just its lifeblood, but also her own courage to venture beyond isolation. How could she transform the raw power under the hood into a metaphor for her own growth with her heart pounding? Like the Mustang's engine moments before ignition, Claire pondered her next move. Would she finally accept help? Or would she prove to herself that her self-sufficiency was enough to drive her forward? The ultimate confrontation with her past, and perhaps her liberation, was bound to unfurl before her once more. It was a precarious balance to maintain, and she knew the moment for decision loomed just ahead, ready to test her resolve. Claire let the weight of the wrench settle into her grip, but it felt heavier than before, almost like a physical embodiment of her uncertainty. She stared into the engine's sleek components, those pieces that had slowly started to feel like extensions of herself. With each bolt tightened, she remembered the lessons learned, the focus, the persistence. Yet, the tension brewed inside her, threatening to derail the progress she had made. She resumed her work, methodically returning to the intricate dance of mechanics she loved. However, Jake's visit snagged at her mind like a cloud clinging to a mountain peak. The skepticism in his eyes had been traced with concern, a tone of advice cloaked in confusion. As she twisted the wrench, she confronted the initial pang of rejection that rose alongside her decision to isolate herself. She had revered independence, revered strength, but now, standing in the thick air of her workshop, she also recognized the fear that propelled her to deny help. Sinking further into the task at hand, Claire lost track of time, the soft whir of the fan mingling with the trapped vigor of the Mustang's potential, each sound a reminder of her solitary quest. Was there strength in solitude, or was it a crutch? She understood the grease-clad faces of the industry that had sometimes belittled her aspirations, yet her ambition surged when the engine's heartbeat echoed in the silence. Each time she closed her eyes to visualize her finished project, a landscape of possibilities unfurled not just for the car, but for herself. Claire recalled the instances from her past when dismissed, the days when her competence was questioned solely based on gender. Now, however, she held the power of the tools in her hands. Who dare question the craft she pursued? And yet the thought of partnerships, of fostering connections with others like Jake, chipped at her walls of rigid independence. A surge of determination swept through her, intermingled with purpose. Her instincts propelled her to make a promise to the Mustang, not merely to restore, but to revive it as an expression of her voyage through conflict toward resolution. The engine could roar back to life, and so could she, even amongst the complexities of shared efforts. Taking a deep breath, Claire laid down the wrench and pulled up her phone. As her fingers hovered over the screen, she hesitated. A simple text inviting Jake to share insights or ask for questions. The tightness in her chest swelled, a mixture of anticipation and fear, as she deliberated if suggesting a partnership would be an equal exchange or a transaction of defeat. Maybe it was time to allow someone to stand next to her in this, offer input, or simply share their passion. The mere act of extending an olive branch felt paradoxical to the fierce individuality she had cultivated. But perhaps isolation was merely a guise. Perhaps the true strength lay in discerning whom to trust and when to engage. With that thought, she pressed send, her heart pounding in rhythm with an accelerated pulse of excitement. This was an open door, a crack in the fleeting shadows tossing between self-reliance and collaboration. As she awaited a response, Claire turned back to the Mustang. The same engine that used to intimidate her with its complexities now felt like a kindred spirit. With a renewed spirit, she picked up the rag and wiped her hands, reaffirmed that this journey filled with moments of doubt was also interlaced with unexpected alliances. But she understood that trust required nurturing, the kind of nurturing that often brought vulnerability alongside courage. Would Jake accept her olive branch? Or would he turn away, leaving her to navigate this challenge alone once more? The decision beckoned, and with the stakes rising, Claire steeled herself for whatever lay ahead, aware that the essential question of partnerships remained unaddressed. What if the breakthrough she sought lay not just through her own struggle, but within the courage to connect with others willing to share their journey? The hum of the workshop was comforting as Claire gazed at her phone, waiting for Jake's response. Would he view her message as a blemish on her autonomy or recognize it as a brave pivot towards collaboration? She felt a tightening in her chest, an echo of her past, where vulnerability often led to ridicule. Yet, she sensed that the very act of reaching out was a challenge to the narrative defining her existence, one cloaked in sheer independence, yet peppered with splintered trust. Minutes turned into an eternity. The Mustang, nestled in the corner like an unfinished thought, demanded her focus. Each glance at the car pulled memories of long nights spent perfecting her skills. The smell of gasoline and worn oil was thick in the air, mingling with her adrenaline. She had come too far to let self-doubt set the tone now. Snapping out of her reverie, she approached the engine, grabbing the wrench with renewed purpose. Cells could be rebuilt like engines. Both required patience, skill, and a little faith. As she twisted the wrench this time, she envisioned not just the Mustang's roaring potential, but also the notion of partnership forming in her mind like oil and steel, a potent blend. What would it be like to maneuver through conflict and creativity with someone alongside, each person contributing a unique strength? The thought sparked a flicker of excitement in her belly. Gradually, progress on the Mustang materialized, each click of the wrench a statement against lingering doubts. With each bolt fastened, she whispered promises to herself. This could be a change, trusting her instincts while allowing Jake a place in her project. She began to picture their collaborative synergy, the way his skill set could elevate her project beyond her singular vision. But doubt remained, as heavy as the engine block she wrestled with. Was she risking too much by inviting someone into her domain? Her hands, smudged with grease, were a testament to solitude, but they did not have to bear the weight alone. After all, she was not dismissing her independence. She was reshaping it. Partnership didn't have to mean surrendering her strength. It could mean amplification. The phone buzzed, and Claire's heart skipped a beat. It was Jake. With bated breath, she read his reply, a mix of enthusiasm and curiosity rippling through the screen. I would love to help. Let's tackle that engine together. When works for you? A wave of relief washed over her, blending with something more potent anticipation. Instead of retreating into her accustomed shell, she was opening the door to collaboration. Yes, she could have her independence and invite others to share their passions. Claire grabbed her phone again and swiftly replied, scheduling an afternoon later that week. The certainty in her choice grew stronger, her resolve crystallizing. Each step towards the Mustang was now not just a mechanical journey, but also a metaphorical one toward connection, a chance to redefine her story. With Jake's support on the horizon, Claire sensed a shift within herself. This was no longer merely about restoring a car. It was about breathing life into elements of her character long overshadowed by a reluctance to trust. The engine would soon roar back to life, not just as a testament to her skill, but as a celebration of collective effort. As she leaned back against the workbench, a thought pierced the haze. What if revealing her vulnerabilities opened another door, a hidden aspect of her journey waiting to be explored, one she had yet to acknowledge among the engines and gears? The uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud, ready to break. Would she have the courage to uncover that new layer of herself? Only time, fueled by her decision, would tell. Claire arrived at the workshop later that week, her heart fluttering with anxiety and curiosity. Jake had arrived early, poring over the engine, his hands deftly navigating the complex weave of metal and parts. She leaned against the doorframe, observing him, a part of her wanting to retreat into the familiar solitude that had defined her for too long. "Hey, Claire," he called, his smile breaking through her hesitation. "Ready to get started?" The warmth in his voice sparked something inside her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Yeah, let us do this," she replied, forcing a smile that barely masked her self-doubt. As they gathered tools and discussed the plan for the Mustang, she felt the tiniest shift in her perspective. Each joint and component they worked on morphed from isolated elements into interlocking pieces of a greater puzzle. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Trusting another person, especially in her sacred space, felt like walking on a wire suspended above a deep chasm of vulnerability. They fell into a rhythm, their banter lightening the laborious task. Yet, as they worked, small hints of resistance flickered in Clara's mind. She instinctively reached for a bolt Jake just tightened, her fingers brushing his. A rush of heat surged through her, and she quickly withdrew, questioning whether she was overstepping their emerging partnership. "Need help?" Jake asked, his brow furrowed slightly, not missing the faintest sign of hesitation in her posture. No, no, I've got this, Claire replied, repressing the doubt, threatening to swallow her whole. But as she tightened the bolt, the memory of her past, of all the times daring to trust had led to disappointment, echoed loudly. Would this time be any different? Jake continued to engage her, a non-intrusive partnership emerging between them. You know, I've worked on a lot of cars, but this one has something special. It's like it has a personality, Jake said, wiping his brow and gesturing to the Mustang S frame. And you seem to have a connection with it. His words resonated within her. As they streamlined the engine, she allowed herself to acknowledge her relationship with the car. It had been her refuge, her companion. And now, it was a catalyst for possibility, one that offered a glimpse into her potential for connection with others. Yeah, I've invested so much time in this, Claire responded, her voice firmer now, as if with every bolt secured. So too was her resolve. But I could use, well, someone else's eyes on it. The acknowledgement hung in the air, a shift she knew was crucial. She took a moment to reflect. Both the Mustang and her personal journey were more substantial with another set of hands and a fresh approach. By embracing collaboration, perhaps she could foster something greater than she could alone. With each hour that passed, Claire felt herself opening up. Their conversation shifted from car mechanics to dreams and aspirations, and she began to share snippets of her childhood and the hurdles she had faced while establishing herself in a predominantly male field. To her surprise, Jake listened with genuine interest, adding his experiences without overshadowing hers. Honestly, he admitted, I had my reservations about working with you. I didn't want to undermine what you built up here. But seeing you in action, it's inspiring. A flush of pride ignited within her. She realized that by expressing her strengths and weaknesses, she was enriching not just Jake's experience, but also her own sense of self. Perhaps this was what partnership could offer, a bold remapping of intertwined destinies. Just as the drive towards her newfound partnership seemed to soar, a sudden echo from the back of the workshop sent chills down her spine. A voice cut through the camaraderie, one she hadn't anticipated. Well, what we have here? A mechanic and her sidekick? Claire turned to face the dark silhouette of a familiar figure, the sharp edge of apprehension gripping her gut. This was someone from her past who had trivialized her ambitions at every turn. Recognition dawned on her. The moment of truth had arrived. Would she hide behind Jake, or confront the source of her insecurities head-on? The stakes fell higher than ever. Her identity as a mechanic, and now as a collaborator, hung in the balance. Time seemed to freeze as Claire locked eyes with her intruder, an undeniable intertwining of past wounds and present achievements crashing into one another. The critic, Archibald, had wandered into her sanctuary and immediately unleashed his scathing remarks. Need an extra hand? Or are you still just pretending to know what you're doing? His voice dripped with disdain, laced with the mocking tone she had fought against for so long. But this time was different. The weight of Archibald's words no longer carried the same devastation. Claire felt the resolve built through countless struggles begin to blossom. She exchanged a quick glance with Jake, who remained steady, giving her the strength to stoke the embers of her courage. Gone were the days where she could be easily silenced. She was standing on ground fortified by her value as a mechanic and a person. Everything I do is with purpose, including this restoration, Claire shot back, her voice firm and unwavering. The words flowed from a well of newfound confidence she had unearthed through resilience and collaboration. I'm no longer competing for validation. I'm forging my own path. The astonishment in Archibald's expression spoke volumes. He was accustomed to rattling her with a simple jab, but she was no longer vulnerable. Her partnership with Jake had illuminated her strengths, allowing the doubts to dissolve like smoke in the air. You may not understand what it takes to breathe life back into a machine, but I do, she added, the fire in her tone igniting the air between them. Claire's pulse quickened, not out of fear, but out of a determination that blazed like the engine she had nurtured back to life. She had become so much more than the mechanic the critics had once relegated her to be. Every moment spent refining her skills was an act of defiance against the perceptions that belittled her quest. Archibald opened his mouth to retort, but Claire raised a hand, silencing him. You spent too long mocking what you don't understand. I'm not just restoring a car. I'm reclaiming my story. And I've learned that inclusion in this world doesn't come from cynicism, but from the strength of community. Claire turned her back on him, stepping further into her workshop and reaffirming her commitment to both the Mustang and the journey she had embraced. Jake's approving nod grounded her, reaffirming that she had allies, not just in him, but in the community she had begun to foster through her online presence. As Archibald's presence faded like an uninvited ghost, the workshop's energy shifted. Claire felt the chorus of connection harmonizing behind her, each bolt tightened, now representative of not just resistance, but collaboration. Let us get back to work, she said, determination threading through her voice, and Jake echoed her sentiment with a smile. In that moment, Claire recognized not only the tangible achievements of her work, but also the deeper connections she had made along the way. Her confidence solidified as she realized that the laughter from the past had transformed into applause, a cadence of recognition for both her craftsmanship and her unwavering resilience. Days turned into weeks, and the Mustang continued to evolve beneath their shared efforts. The engine was polished and perfect, set to roar back to life, much like Claire herself. Finally, the day of ignition arrived. The workshop hummed with anticipation, each of them poised beside the Mustang, tools scattered like breadcrumbs of their journey. Claire felt the weight of history slip away, reduced to mere moments as she prepared to turn the key. The world stood still, a blend of excitement and terror swelling within her. Claire inserted the key, took a deep breath, and twisted it. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then a symphony erupted, a deep, powerful roar that reverberated through the garage walls and captured her very essence. She gripped the edges of the hood as a sense of triumph washed over her, radiating through her entire being. The Mustang had risen, and with it, so too had she, the applause ringing in. Her ears wasn't just an echo from the past. It was the sound of validation, achievement, and the dawning realization that her journey was not solely about machinery, but about her own transformation. In that moment of undeniable power, she understood she had conquered far more than the restoration of a classic car. She had demonstrated the depths of her capabilities, ignited her ambition, and defined her identity within an industry that tried to dismiss her. As she basked in the applause from her small audience, Claire smiled brightly, embracing her newfound confidence fully. She was not merely a mechanic. She had become a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and the tenacity required to reclaim one's truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, she said, addressing the room filled with those who believed in her. This is a reminder that the roar of success belongs to all those who dare to wield their passion with integrity. And with those words, Claire stepped into her next chapter, ready to shape creations that would continue to break molds, and standing firm beside those who believed in the power of perseverance. Now, it's your moment to take action. You need to subscribe now to this channel and not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will fuel your inspiration. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the momentum going. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Claire's journey and share your own stories of overcoming obstacles. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Let's spread the message of resilience together.